I got 3 words for you. Luigi's Mansion 3. It's happening, it's a real game, it's coming to Switch, and it's taking everything inside of me to not just break out dancing right now. I don't think there's going to be anything in this Direct. Definitely not. I don't think Nintendo has anything else to show us yet for next year. Boy, sometimes I am just so happy to be wrong about everything ever. This is the second time this has happened this year. I guess I should be pessimistic more often. Now that we've gotten our first teeny tiny taste of the game, there are obviously a lot of questions we can ask, but the biggest one is it going to be more like the first game or the second game? And it's funny how often we tend to get this with Nintendo games. Like, we get a game reveal and we all hold our breaths, wondering which of 2 formulas it will follow, our enjoyment of the game largely hinging on the answer. Now, that's not to say that if the game ends up being more like Dark Moon, I won't like it. There are a lot of variables and elements in play here. There's one element that would hurt my enjoyment of Luigi's Mansion 3, but many others that would help it. This is complicated business. And actually, because just about this entire discussion is based on which format Luigi's Mansion 3 might follow, and also in case you're not deeply familiar with these games, let's go over the differences between Luigi's Mansion 1 and 2, with pros and cons for each. Let's get the biggest issue out of the way first. The first Luigi's Mansion had an open format. The progression was fairly linear. Each key you found led to one door, which would lead to another key and another door and then another. Like, there was a pretty standard order of operations. But you were still free to move about the mansion and return to previous areas at your leisure. The game never directly controlled where you were or what you were doing. The benefit to this is that naturally, games just feel good when you can move through them at your own pace. Even if events happen in a certain order, it's still nice to feel free, to feel like you're the one opening up this big puzzle box. It feels like you're carving out your own adventure. On the downside though, this can lead to a relatively short game. This format is actually pretty good at padding out playtime with backtracking and whatnot, but from a design perspective, this kind of game also takes a ton of planning and development. All the game's pieces work together, and each and every room is unique both visually and mechanically. Also, how many rooms can you reasonably expect a mansion to have? All in all, the first Luigi's Mansion is terrifically crafted, but it's also like 5 or 6 hours long. In fact, my Let's Play of the game is about 4.5 hours long. Luigi's Mansion 2, however, or Dark Moon, depending on where you live, is a very different animal. Presumably, in an attempt to make the game better suited for handheld play on the 3DS, they made it mission-based. Each mission has a starting point and an end goal. You've only got access to whatever amount of the mansion pertains to the mission, and when you complete that mission, Professor Egad yanks you back to HQ. On paper, this sounds only awful, but there are actually some decent perks. This is much more efficient design. It makes for a lot of gameplay within a relatively small area. Any amount of the environment can change from mission to mission, so you can move through the same place more than once with a different goal each time. Using this method, they were able to turn what would have probably been another 5 or 6 hour game into a 14-hour game. On top of that, the mission structure means that if you're so inclined, you can play each mission multiple times to get a high ranking and find all the treasure possible. That extends playtime really a lot. However, as you've probably already guessed, and have very possibly experienced for yourself, there are a lot of downsides to this system. It absolutely stinks being interrupted all the time, especially when you've just gotten a new item or unlocked a new area and you just want to keep moving forward. It stinks feeling like you have no control over the pacing of the game, and you're only doing anything because EGAD tells you to. Then, while this isn't necessarily a given with this kind of format, in this particular case, some of the missions can be repetitive. Just about every time you're about to grab a key or an important item, oh no, look at that, Polterpup grabbed it and now you gotta go spend a mission looking for him. Didn't see that coming for the 5th time. Overall, the whole mission thing just makes the game feel shallow, more arcadey and video gamey versus Luigi working his way through a haunted mansion, if that makes any sense. It removes too much of the feel of the game. Even beyond format, the games have other differences as well, and sorry, I promise we will talk about 3 soon. It's just really important to touch on all this before we really get the discussion moving. One difference is visual style. The first game was made largely to show off the graphical power of the GameCube, and show off the graphical power of the GameCube it did. The lighting, the particle effects, the cloth modeling, the detailed environments, the ridiculously high poly counts on Luigi and the ghosts, it absolutely blew me away at the time, and even 17 years later, it holds up really well. Dark Moon, on the other hand, opted for a more stylized, cartoony aesthetic. There was much less nitty-gritty detail, everything was smooth and kinda shiny. And to be fair, this fit much better on the 3DS with its 3D tech and its small low-res screen. Like, it definitely made sense, so I can't exactly fault it for that, even if overall I prefer the look of the original for reasons I'll go into in a minute. Another big difference between the two games is that the first one was populated with a lot of little ghosts that you can suck up from room to room, and it had a handful of big boss ghosts, but it also had a whole host of portrait ghosts. Each of these was unique and lived in their own room, and the fun was in figuring out how to open them up for capture. I would argue that these were the strongest part of the game. They were the most interesting, both creatively and in terms of design. Dark Moon, on the other hand, just didn't have portrait ghosts at all. It had little ghosts, and it had bosses, but not much in between. Sure, some ghosts were tougher than others and acted a bit like mini-bosses, but they lacked the identity and cleverness of the portrait ghosts. Instead of having to puzzle out how to capture the majority of the world's ghosts, the world itself was the puzzle more than anything. It was way more about figuring out how to move forward. And you know what? I actually really appreciated that more puzzly aspect, but those portrait ghosts just cannot be replaced. They're way too interesting and fun. As far as atmosphere goes, one had a better overall atmosphere in my opinion. The more realistic art style was pretty at odds with the Mario world, and I think that's why it was so effective and fun. That's why it was so different. It also allowed for some stuff that was actually kinda spooky. The soulless faces of some of the ghosts and the weird noises they made were really creepy, and there was a surprising amount of dread resting over the whole game. Whenever Luigi was in some dark place and low on health and making scared, pained noises, you could feel his hopelessness. There was this real feeling that he was beyond terrified and in way over his head considering this was his first solo adventure. Dark Moon didn't really have any of that. Its cartoony look made more sense in Mario's world, but that robbed it of a lot of its uniqueness and capacity for eliciting real emotions. Even the scariest stuff in the game was mostly just silly. Even the creepiest environments were just not very creepy at all. The Clock Factory had a pretty solid atmosphere, credit where credit's due, but a lot of that only came from digging into its background. In fact, I think the lack of portrait ghosts hurt Dark Moon's locales because there wasn't as much of a sense that any of the ghosts had a place within them. Old factory workers or something like that would have made the Clock Factory a whole lot scarier. Instead, all we had were these little mook ghosts that could have existed anywhere. You know what Dark Moon did have, though? Charm and good design coming out of its ears. Like, sure, it lost that atmosphere and that open feel, which you would think would totally ruin it, but what it did right, it did so right that it still made for a phenomenal game. Like I said, the environments were way more puzzly, and overall the level design was just superb. It was very dense, with so many different things to interact with. Yeah, the mission thing was lame, but the game had multiple mansions with different themes and visual styles, which kept things really interesting. And man, the cutscenes and the animations, they far outshined not only the first game, but most other games Nintendo was putting out at the time. Luigi and all the ghosts were just so expressive, and there was a lot of really great visual humor. Really, Dark Moon was just so much more finely and lovingly crafted in so many ways. Oof, okay, apparently I've got a lot to say about how the first two Luigi's Mansion games stack up against each other, and that was me rushing through it. I might just have to expand this into its own whole video someday. I could probably talk for 20 minutes on that at least. Point is, though, there's a lot riding on the individual decisions being made about this game. There are a lot of variables here. But since we've got some footage to go off of, even if it's a scant 21 seconds, we can get something of an idea of how this new Luigi's Mansion is gonna be. So, for the first time in the history of my channel, we're gonna do this Game Explain style. We're gonna comb through this thing shot by shot and see what we can find. I'm gonna start with the last shot though, just because it seems to answer one big question right off the bat. Judging by this image, it is all but guaranteed that we'll be returning to one single quote-unquote mansion, like in the first game, versus the multiple mansions in the second game. It seems to be a hotel, and it's very tall, basically a skyscraper. This, I think, is a perfect evolution of the mansion idea. It's a way to have the whole game take place within one building, but it's a big enough building that the game can, in theory, be a decent length. Starting at the bottom floor and making your way up, presumably with each floor acting as its own unique sort of stage, would work really well. The idea fits the needs of the series and still manages to seem fresh. There's no guarantee that any of this is the case. Maybe there's 5 other hotels just like this one, but I'm willing to bet that this is the case. It certainly seems that way. But going back to the beginning now, in the first shot of the trailer, we see the classic Luigi opening up the front door bit. 2 notable things here. First, his new poltergust seems to be filled with some sort of greeny, yellowy something. We can see the transparent edge of the container, so we know that it's not just the color of the container itself. It could be filled with some greeny, yellowy ghosts already. This could just be some sort of visual change to make it look less like a regular old vacuum cleaner, or it could be a sign of some new feature on the thing, maybe a new mechanic. The second notable thing, Luigi's Mansion in glorious, glorious HD. Oh, yeah. Moving on to the next shot, the big takeaway that we get here, and that we also get from the rest of the trailer, it's obvious that the graphical style is based off of Dark Moon. To my slight dismay, still gone are the darker, more realistic visuals from the first game. We can see the more exaggerated, cartoony look in just about everything. Specifically, basically nothing here is an exact square. This gives everything an off sort of look that definitely makes you think spooky, but like Halloween store decoration silly spooky, not actual spooky. Like I said earlier, I can't exactly fault Nintendo for preferring this style. It makes more sense, it makes it look like this place might actually fit somewhere in the Mario universe, and Nintendo probably doesn't at all want to make a game that's actually spooky. But yeah, it's a bit of a bummer. Even beyond lacking the old spooky charm, I would argue that this style is just less pleasing to the eye. Simple cartoony visuals are their own thing, for sure, but when they're in a game like this, where there's such a heavy emphasis on lighting and atmosphere, they don't fit as well. The light doesn't have as much to play off of. We have all these textureless, solid color planes, and they feel kinda out of place. Here the style ends up feeling unpolished. This game is still in development, so plenty could change before release, but that's the first impression that I get. Moving on, we see Luigi walking through a hallway when he's startled by 3 ghosts bursting out of a maintenance cart. Here we've got proof that yes, at least some of this game, probably all, but you can never be completely sure this early on, takes place in a hotel. We can see 2 rooms marked 506 and 507, and of course the cart, which naturally maintenance people push around from room to room as they clean. Interestingly enough, 506 and 507 suggest that here, Luigi is up on the 5th floor. The way I see it, this could mean one of 3 things. Possibility number 1, this shot is from later in the game. Doesn't seem too likely to me for a short reveal trailer. Possibility number 2, Luigi has access to all or most of the hotel early on, at least common areas like hallways. Definitely possible, but that's still a little unlikely. That's a whole lot of space to have open from the beginning. Possibility number 3, and my theory is that in this game, you don't start from the bottom of the hotel and work your way up, you get trapped at the top and have to escape. Now, this is not a rock-solid theory. The game would lose a good amount of thematic heft if it were arranged that way. Climbing to the top of a skyscraper or a tower or whatever is a little more thrilling. The bottom is the common area of the building where anybody can go, but the higher you go, the more exclusive and mysterious things get. But at the same time, having to escape a mansion rather than just unraveling its mysteries, that's fun. I'd like that. The stakes would feel higher, and that would help recapture some of the intensity of the first game. Even if the top to bottom idea is wrong, I think my trapped Luigi idea is on the nose for reasons we'll talk about in a bit. Anyway, here we can also see a wanted poster for Luigi. If King Boo ain't up to his old tricks, I'll be pretty darn surprised. More importantly though, this shot gives us our first look at the new low-level ghosts. The ghosts from the first game were kinda blobby and ugly, whereas the ones from Dark Moon were actually quite cute and friendly looking, and the ones here seem to be of yet another new design. But let's move on to the next shot to get a better look. Here we see some very basic ghost catch-in action. Luigi flashes the ghosts with his light, then starts sucking them up. That's Luigi's Mansion's gameplay in a nutshell. Good to see that that hasn't changed. The only interesting thing here is that the numbers start at 100 instead of 10. Not sure why they would want to complicate things by adding another digit, but hey, maybe there's some reason, or maybe they'll change it back before release, who knows. Back to the ghosts though, in some ways they're a bit of a mix between the first 2 games. We can see that they've left behind their usual green, and this darker color combined with the more grossy looking faces and heads make them look a good deal more sinister, which, hey, is kinda nice. It's actually a step back in the direction I've been wishing for. They're much creepier than the friendly ghosts of Dark Moon. They seem to be a little less expressive so far, which is a trade-off, but again, that also contributes to the creepiness factor, so it's good. Other stuff about this shot, we see a dining table lined with food that's pretty reminiscent of the one in the first game. I would probably just think that this was like any other dining table lined with food and not tie it to the first game at all if it weren't for that cake or flan or whatever it is right in the center. Makes it look an awful lot like something that a big fat portrait ghost would chow down on, huh? Return of portrait ghosts confirmed. It doesn't seem too likely just based on this, but a man can dream. Finally, just look at that scenery through the windows. How wonderful is that? A serene lake glimmering in the moonlight surrounded by mountains? I like it. I'm definitely hoping for more other really nice little graphical stuff like this to complement the cartoony graphics. I like me some good graphics, so what can I say? Moving on, we've got what might potentially be the most interesting shot in the whole trailer. For the most part, it just looks like a regular old shot of Luigi in the hotel's lobby. I'll admit, this does sort of go against my theory that you have to work your way from the top of the hotel down. However, you gotta get into the hotel somehow. Maybe you start at the bottom, then you somehow get sent to the top, you take an elevator and it gets stuck or something. I don't know, I could be totally wrong, grasping at straws, and there could be some other really great reason why he was already up on the 5th floor in this trailer, or maybe that shot is from a later part of the game. I don't know, but it's still fun to think about. What's really important about this shot, though, is the series of pictures at the top of the frame. Now, this could easily mean nothing. Or it could mean a lot. On the nothing end, this could just be a little bit of flavor. The most visible faces are those of Toad, Luigi, and Mario, who have all been in Luigi's Mansion games and have been subject to paranormal shenanigans. At first, I assumed that this was King Boo's hit list or something, and it was suggesting that the ghosts have captured the people in the pictures. Since Luigi's picture is also crossed out, this isn't exactly likely, unless this is a Bruce Willis situation and Luigi's already dead or something, but I'm not really counting on that. So I'm led to believe that this is indeed a hit list, but the X's just mean, these guys are bad, go get them. But here is where things get interesting. Who's that last character on the right? It's the only character whose face we can't really make out, but based on those colors, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that it is definitely Princess Peach. That is a picture of Princess Peach. This could easily mean that she's simply in the game and is now kidnapped, much like we can probably assume of Mario and Toad. That's really how these games work. But what does a lineup of Toad, Luigi, Mario, and Peach remind you of? Would I be absolutely crazy to imagine that such a reference to Super Mario Bros. 2 might just mean that these are all playable characters? Could it mean that you can switch between them? Or that maybe you play as a different one on each level of the hotel? Could the inclusion of a co-op mode in the 3DS Luigi's Mansion Remaster mean that Luigi's Mansion 3 will feature co-op play and more or less be the very thing I predicted in my 2018 prediction video way back in December? Only time will tell, but if you ask me, probably not. I'm wrong about everything. Next up, we got this shot. Luigi seems to be in the lobby of a concert hall. Obviously, it's quite the fancy hotel. The interesting thing here? Jetpack! In Dark Moon, Luigi could jump around while trying to capture a ghost, but here it looks like the Poltergust 10,005 or whatever it is lets him catch a little air whenever he wants. It'll be interesting to see how they use this mechanic and if it ever extends beyond little hops like this. Maybe in the end you just rocket up to the top of the hotel and punch King Boo in the face? Yeah, I bet that happens. Speaking of new Poltergust features, we return to the dining hall for the next shot, and this time Luigi aims at a ghost with what appears to be a laser sight, and right before he gets his clock cleaned, he launches a plunger, which kind of awkwardly, but also kind of terrifyingly snakes its way through the air onto the ghost's face. I assume this is a way of temporarily incapacitating ghosts. There seems to be a rope on the plunger, but it's not attached to anything. Maybe later you can tie ghosts to stuff? That'd be pretty cool. It's worth noting that shooting it removes it from the nozzle of the Poltergust, though right before he shoots it, it looks like he switches to the plunger, so it probably just reverts back to normal after he's done shooting. Whether or not there's limited plunger ammo, or if you can do it as many times as you want, though, is a mystery, though my money is on limited ammo. After this shot, yep, there's that Polterpup, a little more evidence that this game draws most heavily from Dark Moon. I don't hate the little guy or anything, yeah, he's kinda cute, but I really do hope he's not just there to steal your keys and hide again. I will say that this shot of him, like, being slowly pulled toward Luigi, it's really funny, and it shows that there's a little distortion when viewing something through the pull of the Poltergust, which is a nice little graphical detail. Then we got some ghostly gates slamming shut, but that's pretty standard Luigi's Mansion stuff. He's no doubt being trapped into a fight in this room. Here we've got a ghost giving Luigi a good old-fashioned scare in the face. We can see big doors that are all boarded and chained shut. This definitely supports the idea of Luigi finding himself trapped here after entering. And finally, we get what we assume is the reaction shot. Luigi Macaulay Culkin in Home Aloneing before the trailer cuts to the title and the image of the hotel. Wanna know what I think, though? I don't think this is a reaction shot. Like, I don't think the shot of the ghost scaring him is actually what happens before his yell. To me, this is not the panicked yell of Luigi being scared by a ghost. This is the Home Alone yell of someone who just realized that they're stuck in a haunted hotel. Just how it looks to me, though. Well, now that that's done, all that's left is to give you my hopes and dreams for Luigi's Mansion 3. You already know that ditching the mission structure is the biggest thing, and after picking apart the trailer, I'm at least a little confident that we'll be going back to the original format. If I'm right, and Luigi is stuck in the mansion, and for some reason EGAD's weird machine can't warp him out of it, it would make little sense to break everything up into missions. And yeah, getting rid of missions means getting rid of the replayability that comes with going for a good rank, but hopefully they can kinda combine the mission ranking system from Dark Moon with the overall end-of-game ranking system from the original. Maybe there are lots of secrets and tons of treasure to find, so to get the best ending or ranking or whatever, you have to find it all. But instead of being able to miss out on treasure and take too much damage and mess up your chances like in the first game, it would be nice if it really just came down to finding everything at your own pace. These games are already good at packing a lot of secrets and little details into small areas and rewarding curiosity, so lots to find and collect would be much appreciated. Without the padding of a mission structure, length also becomes an issue, but I just hope that the game ends up being a good length anyway, and maybe that it finds other ways to extend playtime a little less cheaply. I'm all for using areas multiple times with different goals. In fact, that makes the game world feel a little more dynamic and real. Never truly feeling like a room or an area is clear would make things a little more intense and encourage continued exploration. Overall, though, I want a decently meaty adventure. A padded 14 hours worked on the 3DS, but I don't think an unpadded 14 hours is too much to ask for on the Switch. 10 with good replayability at like the bare minimum. They should make this the biggest, best Luigi's Mansion game, the kind you would expect to play nearly 2 decades after the original. In terms of mechanics and abilities and overall level design, I hope it carries the Dark Moon torch. Just like Dark Moon, I want it to refine what we've already got and introduce new stuff that opens up new possibilities. And this probably goes without saying, but upgrades! I loved using my money to upgrade the Poltergust in Dark Moon, but I want more. More stuff to buy with my treasure, more upgrades that feel substantial and make me feel awesome. Then, that visual humor. I want more fun little cutscenes and silly ghost animations, just like Dark Moon. I still don't expect a deep story or anything with like long cutscenes, but lay the gags on me, man. I love that stuff. And you know what probably sounds lame, but I think would be pretty great? What if Nintendo took this opportunity to parody other horror games? Like, horror movies get parodies and homages and stuff like that all the time. I think Luigi's Mansion could be the perfect series to do the same thing with famous horror games. Like, am I crazy? Would that not be awesome? Like, have Polterpup just burst through a window like the dog in the first Resident Evil or something? That kind of stuff? Come on. That's just funny. You already know that I'm a little iffy on the graphics. Even if they are going with the Dark Moon style here, I just hope they polish things up a little bit more before launch. The game just kind of has a feel to it. Like, I've complained about this before, but you know Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu, and Eevee? Those don't look like games that were made with the Switch's hardware in mind. They look like handheld games that were then up-resed and shined up. They certainly look better than 3DS games, but they don't really look like Switch games. I had a similar problem with Super Mario 3D World. The style of gameplay was impressive on the 3DS, but when brought over to the Wii U, it just didn't feel very impressive anymore, considering what the system was capable of. It kind of felt like you were playing a handheld game on your home console. Kinda different, but kinda similar. We know that Pikmin 3 started its life on the Wii and was later moved to the Wii U. Some of its assets were gorgeous, obviously built for the Wii U, but then other older assets slipped through the cracks and we ended up with some stuff that looked like up-resed Wii graphics, because they were. From these few seconds of trailer, Luigi's Mansion 3 kinda sorta feels the same way a little bit. They built the GameCube version from the ground up and it was gorgeous. Then they built Dark Moon from the ground up to work with the 3DS's limitations and it worked really well. But this doesn't really feel like a home console game that was built from the ground up for Switch. It feels a little too much like Dark Moon. Like, I get starting with Dark Moon's building blocks, but it feels like they used that same graphics engine as a foundation and just started scaling things up from there, and if that's the case, then it definitely shows. The graphical quality is just so uneven. Some stuff looks great, and other stuff looks kind of low poly and gross. I could easily be wrong about all this, but if I'm right and we're pretty much looking at a Switch game built on a 3DS engine, I just have to hope that it only affects the graphics and doesn't affect the scope of the game. I just don't want it to feel like a handheld game. I want it to feel like Luigi's going on his grandest adventure yet. Big, interesting environments, exciting boss battles, controls that utilize a full spread of inputs beyond just 4 face buttons and 2 shoulder buttons. But hey, we're talking about 21 seconds of actual footage here. Let's wait a little bit longer before we start coming to too many conclusions. I've only got one more hope, and it's that they bring back something like the Scare Scraper, only without a time limit. The idea of working through a challenge and hunting down ghosts with 1 or more buddies, co-op Luigi's Mansion, just awesome. Just let us do it at our own pace. And hey, while we're wishing, give us a map editor too. Do it! Luigi's Mansion 3 has the potential to be really, really amazing. Both of the previous games did different things so well, and if Nintendo is able to combine the strengths of each and add to the series while they're at it, we could be looking at a heck of a ride here. My fear is that it might only be as good as Dark Moon, but considering that's like my worst case scenario, that's not too bad. That would still make for another solid game. But I've got my fingers crossed for more, man. They just gotta look at the feedback for each game and play their cards right. I believe in you, Nintendo, or Next Level Games, or whoever's working on this. You can make this Luigi's Mansion better than the first two by a country mile. This is your chance to basically perfect the series formula. Real quick, before we go, while I've got a soapbox and I'm already talking about Luigi's Mansion, I just want to talk a little bit about the 3DS remake / remaster, whatever it is. I know people like to throw around words like entitled and whiner or whatever whenever anyone says they're bummed out about this game, but I'm a little bummed out about this game. Like, yeah, it's better than no remaster at all, and I also get why Nintendo made the decision to put it on the 3DS. That whole 3D thing, like they wanted to somehow make the first one use a 3D display or whatever. This was them realizing that dream or something. Sure. Plus, they already had the Dark Moon engine. Why not drop in all the assets from the original and tweak a few things? But it just seems like such a wasted opportunity. Plenty of Wii and Wii U games have been ported to the 3DS, and with most of them it's been like, yeah, cool, now we've got the option to play this game on the go. Now that we got the Switch though, the only benefit to putting a game on the 3DS is, well, for owners of both systems, there isn't one. 3D is like the only thing, and just about no one cares about that. And this isn't so bad for most games. The 3DS has a huge install base after all. Again, it all makes sense. But it's different for a classic like Luigi's Mansion. I don't want the game on my Switch because I've been dying to play it on the go. That would be nice, but it's not the main reason. The real reason I want it on my Switch is so I can play it with pretty new graphics. Luigi's Mansion is an old game, and it's one of my favorite games, so I would absolutely love to have a high-res remastered version, even if it was just a simple upscaling. I ain't too picky. But instead, we're getting it on 3DS with a lower resolution than even the original, and with some graphical changes that actually seem kinda worse. I guess the game's maybe supposed to work as an introduction to the series for people who haven't gotten Switches or even played Dark Moon yet, but for us old folks who grew up playing the original, this port does nothing. Even though it's one of my very favorite games, I have no real desire to play it on my 3DS. And if I'm indifferent toward a game that by all accounts should be extremely relevant to me, well, hey, it could just be me talking, but that makes me feel like it might not have been the best decision on Nintendo's part. But hey, it ain't too much of a problem though, because oh, look at that, Luigi's Mansion 3 is coming next year. Who's got time to worry about 3DS ports? What even is a 3DS? I don't remember anymore. Luigi's Mansion 3, baby! Well, thank you for watching what turned out to be something of an exhaustive discussion on Luigi's Mansion. If you've got any strong feelings about the new game, you can let me know down. This video was brought to you in large part by my top patrons. If you want to be a patron too, you can go to my Patreon page. But these guys with their names going by are the coolest guys in the world. Look at them. I like them. If you're one of them, I love you. End of me doing this. Bye. Seriously though, thank you guys so much. These guys, scrolling guys, love you. You're awesome. Oh, I love you so much.